when somebody says, oh, I didn't have it as bad as you, screw that, because then you're telling somebody who doesn't maybe get hit as hard as you that they have no right to their journey, that they have no right to feel bad. So you never judge somebody else's pain. So there is no worse off.
Hey there, my name is Sean and this is Suicide Noted. On this podcast, I talk with suicide attempt survivors so that we can hear their stories. Every year around the world, millions of people try to take their own lives and we almost never talk about it. And when we do talk about it, many of us, including me, aren't very good at it. One of my goals with this podcast is to have more conversations with attempt survivors and hopefully better conversation. We are talking about suicide. This may not be a good fit for everyone. Please take that into account before you listen. I do hope you listen because there is so much to learn. Now, if you're a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to share your story, I'd love to talk. You can email us at hello@suicidenoted.com. If you like this podcast, please keep doing what you're doing. Listen. And you can let people know about it. If you rate it and review it, this also helps get the word out there. People in places like Italy and South Africa and the UK and Germany have heard these stories by these survivors because they matter. I want more people in more places to hear them, and I really appreciate your support. Today I am talking with Cei. Cei lives in Nebraska, and he is a suicide attempt survivor. Hey, Cei, how are you?
I'm okay.
Where are you, by the way? You in the Midwest somewhere, right?
I'm in Nebraska. There's a herd of buffalo outside. I'd show it to you, but you wouldn't be able to see it anyway.
Right.
There's social distancing.
Sure. Understand. Nice. Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I always ask people this. The great majority of the people who have tried to take their lives are not talking about it publicly. I can say that with absolute certainty. How did you come to that where you were okay talking about it? How did that happen?
I guess I got to the point where I had absolutely nothing left to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that because I had nothing left to lose, it didn't matter what I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that talking about it made people feel a little less, quote unquote, crazy. And I know crazy is a derogatory term, but I mean, for lack of a better, and then folks started to tell me thank you or something similar. And so I did it again. And the more people told me, don't do that, that's risky, the more I did it because I don't like people telling me what to do.
So where were you doing that where you started to talk about it? Would that be online or offline spaces?
Well, online didn't exist when I started. So
okay.
Yeah.
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 And people were receptive, or it just varied?
Receptive. I'm kind of a freak of nature where people come up to me in grocery stores or hotel hallways and tell me their life story.
Okay.
Or I'll walk in to deliver something off like Marketplace or Free Cycle or whatever, and they'll talk to me for 2 hours and that sort of thing. So, and it's always been like that. So if they seem a little sad, they'll just vomit out their troubles and I'll share my story and then we'll both walk away feeling a little better. And that's been that way since I was 17, 18 years old.
What is that called? Is there a name for that?
A deep sense of empathy and a little bit of sadism, I guess.
That's an interesting combo, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Share with me, in as much as you're comfortable, about your attempt or attempts, what they were like. However you want to sort of frame it, it's your story.
My first attempt was when I was 9, and I didn't even really know that I was doing it then. It was probably an accidental attempt. My first memories were when I was about 9, 10 months old, and they were memories of being abused by my father, sexually abused. And that was the longest experience of my life. It didn't stop. The last attempt was when I was 19 of him being inappropriate. And when I was 9, I tried to gut myself of the organs they preferred, if you will. And it caused a lot of bleeding, and I ended up in the hospital. But because that was a willing thing that I did purposely to try and end the icky, I count that as an attempt, because if it didn't work, I just wanted to cease to exist anyway. And it didn't work. I ended up in the hospital, and everything was stitched up, blood was replaced, and I was back out there again. But I consider that my first attempt. My second attempt was about a year later. I didn't know that you couldn't die on Datril, but my parents didn't even know I was gone. I was in my room, sick and tired and asleep, passed out. I don't know, but I was in a pile of puke on my grandmother's quilt for like a day and a half, and they didn't notice. Around 13, I was in a play, Arsenic and Old Lace, and I was just sitting after rehearsal hours and stuff, and I was fondling the starting gun. Well, it was a gun, but it was a starting gun in the play. And just as I was like going to squeeze the trigger, a friend took it away, and it was just like a little starting cap powder burn, on the hand and stuff. But it could have done some damage. And these were all non-thought out juvenile attempts, impulsive, that sort of thing. But it was just so nasty that I just impulsively just wanted to escape. Nothing was really well thought out until I was about almost 16. I was incredibly creative, manipulative, convincing, and I ran away from home for about a week and a half, convinced my mother, who didn't live with us at that time, my mother's landlord, that I was supposed to be there, but my mom, who was a trucker, was on a layover. So I got access to her apartment and hid there for about a week. And when I was done hiding there, I went to my grandparents' house. And my grandfather, who was a co-participant in the sex abuse, it was better at his house, though, because he didn't hit or call names. Just my father did all three of those things. So I was planning to do myself in. So I was on the front porch, and I didn't care anymore. So I was crying, and my across the street neighbor, his name is Cei Loofe. I grew up with him, and he came over and wanted to know what was wrong. And since it didn't matter anymore, I told him everything. And he was the first person that ever believed me. And he said, sit there and just be still. And he went into the garage where my grandfather was, and he came back about 20 minutes later, and he said, you don't have to worry anymore. And he didn't say it was going to be okay, but he said it was done. And my grandfather never touched me again. The next day, Jay brought me a red pen and a notebook and said, instead of cutting yourself, write instead. It's the same color red. And I did.
Dude, I want to meet Jay. He sounds like a cool dude.
He was.
Cei Loofe.
Yeah.
How old was he when he gave you that suggestion to?
24, because he's 9 years older than I am. Yeah, he was my closest friend in age friend. Yeah, where I grew up at.
Wow, so you had a lot of friends that were much older?
Yeah, there were 12 kids. 13 if you counted the snotty girl up the street, but we didn't really count her because she was a snotty girl up the street. Right. But there were 12 kids at the time. I mean, it was a very small town, so
yeah. Yeah, and so growing up in a small town, and when stuff like that's happening, the stuff that you dealt with, I would imagine either way it's brutal and awful, but like even maybe harder in some ways.
Yeah. Later, my cousin, who was also perpetrated by my grandfather and my father, he wrote me a letter. And after I received that letter, we did some research, and for people that would talk to us, some retroactive apologies, even though it wasn't our fault. And we figured out that probably 3 generations of kids were molested by our family. That's a legacy that's kind of sad, sad and hurtful and hard to deal with, but it stopped. I mean, we didn't go any further.
Yeah. And so you tried several times, right? So you said you were 9.
Yeah.
Then several during your teenage years. When was the last one?
There was lots of thinking about it, but the last real attempt was, and I'm not even sure if it counts, but when I was in my 2015. So what was I, 35?
Mm-hmm.
Was I 35 then? Oh gosh, no. 40, 45.
Oh, you look good. You look young.
God, I'm old. Yeah, I'm 50. I wanted to cut off my hands with something. So my partner at the time just took away all the sharp things. It was on July 4th, my 2013. There you go. Yeah. My father isn't my father, but my biological father is my father of record. And the last time that he attempted something was when I was 19 on the 4th of July because he was drunk off of his ass and thought that I was my mother and tried something in the middle of the day, in the middle of a party. And the 4th of July has never been happy, really.
Mm.
And so I had a dream and that put me in a bad place. And I woke up and it was hard. But, I've thought of it. I've been in bad places. I have a vial of pills in case I ever need them, but now it's more of a quality of life thing because I have some pretty serious illnesses, but I have never been tempted to go there. Never. I have a therapist. I have an ISA dog, and through childhood and through my young adult years, it was an almost daily, you wake up every single day and say, what am I going to do today to keep myself living?
Mm.
And I go through
So,
periods of depression now where that happens, but not very often.
so when you're a kid or a teenager, it sounds like hardcore ideation. I don't know the technical word for it.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, suicidal ideation.
That's pretty
Yeah.
extreme. That's
Well, it's
hard.
depression and probably dysthymia, but
Uh-huh.
super deep depression. It was hard. I
Like,
screwed up a good portion of my life.
yeah. Sometimes I'll ask these questions and I almost feel like they're either a little unfair or unanswerable, but I'll still ask them because I never know. Like, how did you stay alive?
I had a lot of people that cared for me, in spite of my protests. I was an addict and a drunk from the age of 11 to about 22.
Mm-hmm.
I remember stealing my dad's Red Hearts and White Crosses and taking them down to the truck stop about 6 blocks away, Arnold's truck stop in Fremont, Nebraska, and selling them to truckers. And I have no idea why those truckers bought from me because
Right.
they would be still in jail probably. But I started selling drugs, and then because a good dealer doesn't take his own product, I wasn't high then, but just a couple of years later, I started getting high and started drinking, and I didn't realize it until almost in my 20s. But my dad, who was a law enforcement officer, would bring booze to my house because if the kids were drunk, he could groom them easier. I didn't realize that's what he was doing, but my house was the party house. But when I got older and it just got so bad. I mean, I was hooking sometimes. I didn't care who I was sleeping with. I was so promiscuous, and all those things, they fall in line with all the classical symptoms and all that crap. But one day I just called a friend. I was that bad, and I don't know what it was like. She never told me, and she's passed away, so I'm never going to know. But I detoxed at her house for about 2 weeks, and then I call myself a skeptical agnostic, enjoying the mythology of Christ right now. Mythology, not mythology. But I feel like something just, walked in and set me straight. I still don't know why I'm so well adjusted. And that said, I've got a lot of stuff up, but I just feel like I was supposed to be here to do something.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's done. Maybe there's more to do. I have a goddaughter now who's hurting pretty badly, and she feels better when she's with me. So maybe that's it. Or maybe it's to tell the nurse that's attending to my death that she's doing a good job. Who knows? But maybe she's not born yet. Who knows? But the people that cared about me, even though I told them they're wasting their time and I'm not worth it, kept me going.
Yeah. I don't know who's listening to this. I do know I know that we have more listeners than we had yesterday, which is great. Growing slowly, but I share that because presumably people that are going to find it, however they find it, some will probably be in bad shape. And maybe there are other people that are sort of in the position of helping or caring for or supporting. And it sounds like you had people in your life who cared and presumably, tell me if I'm wrong, some who responded not so nicely.
Yeah.
After you tried. And I always ask, I'm always wondering, what does that look and feel like when it's, hey, that's helpful? And what does it look like or feel like when or sound like when it's, whether you realize it or not, you're not helping. You're making this worse by your words or actions. So I guess it's a two-part question, if that makes sense.
Ironically, they both feel pretty crappy,
Mm.
because when somebody is helping you, you really don't know you're being helped until probably down the line. And while you're being helped, um, often you have such a low self-worth or low self-esteem, you feel guilty because you're being helped. And you spend a lot of time trying to refuse the gift of help, the gift of caring, and trying to convince the individual that their time is better spent on somebody else. And you feel guilty and not worthy. And they have to try really hard to convince you that their attention, that you're worthy of it, and that you're worth breath,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a long time for them sometimes to get through to you. And in the meantime, if you're really good at convincing them, sometimes they just get fed up and they leave. So it takes a really strong sense of stick-to-itiveness and good patience and a good heart to keep on going. And that's the people that are brave enough to bring suicide up. So many people are scared to say that word,
Yeah.
And then the ones that just go on through their lives being afraid, they're the ones you're fine with, because they're the neutral people, the folks that are neuter that you don't even know about, and they're the ones that you can be with the most comfortably. And the ones that blow you off say, I'll help with anything, and then they help you like 3 times and then they're gone. Those just reinforce the fact that you think you're nothing. So unfortunately, they're pretty much in the same category. It's not until you realize that perhaps you're worth a little bit, that the ones that are helping you stand out to be in the better crowd. That takes a bit of work.
Yeah. Why do you think people are so scared to bring up that word, suicide?
Because death has a lot of power. And when you die of natural causes or because of disease, it's something that you can't help.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you took a little more chemo, or maybe if, Uncle Johnny could have gotten there just in time to, maybe if they would have waited for that or something. But suicide is something that a person can, in theory, control. And maybe if they bring it up, then they're going to push that person who can control their lives to it, and they don't want to be responsible for that. But people don't have that much power. They just don't realize that. I mean, talking about suicide isn't going to drive somebody over the edge. Hearing that word isn't going to make somebody do it. If anything, it'll give them permission to unburden themselves and get help. Pop the cork a little bit and let some of that nasty effervescence go.
Maybe feel a little less alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if suicide's scary to them, to the people that are afraid to say the word, imagine how it feels to the people that are considering it.
Yeah.
They think if they say it, then they're going to cause it, and they're not.
I agree with you. I've had people push back a little bit, maybe with super young people, maybe they're like a 12-year-old and you plant an idea, but I can't guarantee it. But I don't
No,
think
I don't
so.
think so.
Especially now. And I don't know. I'll never know. I try to do things responsibly, ethically. Look, I mean, I ask people these sort of questions that aren't typically asked. I don't think, for example, people sharing with me how they tried, I don't think that's giving anyone any ideas. We don't go over blueprints here.
No.
But like you tell me that you took pills or you jumped off a bridge, like that's part of the story, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important part sometimes to not leave out, because this happened.
Yeah. Instructions are on the internet. And if you were concerned about your kid having instructions, then you wouldn't put them on the computer.
Right.
And having been a 12-year-old that had already attempted, I would have welcomed adult intervention or adult conversation that was healthy. Hearing adults having conversations would probably stop a lot of this stuff.
I want your thoughts on this. I don't think most adults, let's assume we're talking about ones that are well-intentioned. The ones that aren't, I think, is a different conversation. I don't think they actually know how to have those conversations. I don't know if I'm right there. I get the sense that they don't know what to say.
It doesn't have to be at a suicidal moment, though. I mean, as soon as your kids come out of the body, discuss what the body parts are called. Discuss that everybody's skin is beautiful. Discuss that your life is important. Parents don't even touch on those topics, not normally. I don't even know when my parents ever said your life is worth living. And if you feel sad, come and talk to me. Nobody ever said that to me. I say that to the kiddos in my life all the time, but I didn't hear it from somebody as a role model.
Yeah.
Somebody had said to me, your life is important. And if you feel sad, come and talk to me. Man, made a difference. So it doesn't have to be a suicidal moment. It just should be all the time. You're valuable and come talk to me when you feel sad. That's all it has to start with.
Great point. Yeah. It's not necessarily we're in a crisis. What do we do or say, or how do we handle it? It's every day.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I mean, my parents cared about me. My friends' parents cared about them. And I don't think that was conversations we had much, if at all.
No.
We learn a lot of stuff formally and informally, which is arguably what our culture thinks is important, right?
Yeah.
Please and thank you. Don't cross the street. Look both ways. Basic math. Long list. We don't learn this shit. Why?
It's a pendulum swing. I mean, a couple of hundred years ago or so, families lived in the same house and they all were nurturing and took care of each other. And then that got to be too stuffy. And then we all had bigger boundaries that were thicker. And then we all stopped talking to each other and separated. And then now, that's getting a little more crunchy granola, touchy feely. And it's just a pendulum swing. I just hope that pendulum can be broken, and maybe stay a little more touchy feely.
Yeah. I haven't heard anybody say it like that. I like that. A pendulum.
Yeah.
And that maybe there were times that we were better at it because it was, like you said, right? We're around each other and we're probably 200 years ago in a more rural area. I imagine you're just collaborating more. You have to.
Yeah. I mean, like now with this COVID-19 thing, families are closer. They're spending time together. They're playing games together. Neighbors know their names. They're having cul-de-sac dance parties,
Right.
That wouldn't have happened. I mean, that's one of the benefits of being forced to be together.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a small percentage that have murdered each other, but other than them.
Well, yeah, but
No, I think on the whole, you're right. It makes sense that let's do this thing. I want to bust or dispel some myths that you and others might have or others have around suicide, ideation, attempt survivors, the whole shebang. Like, what are a few that stand out to you that it's like, nah, that's bullshit?
That you can tell if somebody is suicidal. A lot of us are really good at faking it. For instance, at the major medical center that's here in my city, you can probably tell, what the name of it is. It doesn't matter. But most big hospitals or hospitals in general say, are you feeling suicidal? Do you have any depression and all that sort of thing? And nurses can get into my record and know when my last attempt was and that I am being treated for depression and that I will always say no, because if you say yes, you are treated in such a manner where it's stupid. Because I went to have a seizure study done because I have a seizure disorder. And I said, well, sure, I feel a little sad because I'm in here for a seizure disorder. It makes sense to me. So they gave me clamshells for my dinner and plastic dinnerware. Well, having worked with juvenile offenders, I know that in a heartbeat, you can break off a plastic knife and make a shank sharper than anything. And I'm not going to concuss myself with my plastic hospital tray. I mean, that's just not going to be easy to do. So why do the clamshells that make everything mushy and nasty? Plus, it makes people remind themselves of how depressed they are. And when I'm in a hospital room with a neck of wires right around here, and I have no sitter in the room to guard me from my suicidal ideations that are so bad that I have clamshells and plastic silverware.
Right.
And then I counted up everything in the room that I could have harmed myself with. It was like 41 items in the room that I could have hurt myself with, but I'm so bad that I get clamshells for dinner.
I'm not laughing at you. You know that, right? I'm just laughing at the absurdity of the way a lot of institutions or whatever, hospitals, call them whatever you want, like the way they deal with sort of, I think it's a risk-averse model, risk aversion. And but sometimes even that, like you're saying the examples, it's like, who's running the show here? What?
It needs to be more. It would be more kind if they had a human in there instead of some styrofoam, and then not even thorough. But people, because of that, they hide it really well.
Yeah,
you don't want to be treated inconsistently unfairly. I mean, I'm intelligent. I'm gregarious. I hang out with community and stuff, and I know that was full of crap. Yeah. It was just checking off a box and doing something small so they could avoid liability.
Right, you nailed it. Right.
Yeah, and I get that, but it wasn't thorough. I could have hurt myself in just a moment. So if you're going to do it all the way. And if you're not going to do it, then don't. But I, like now, I fake it. I say no every time because I know what's coming. Humans are smart.
Yeah.
So you're not going to know a lot of the times if somebody is suicidal. We will hide it because we don't want to go through the crap. And we know that we're feeling bad today, but tomorrow is probably going to be all right. So why why bother telling anybody? Because you're not going to make a difference. And all I'm going to get is clamshell dishes.
I have gotten to be I wish I were better about this. I'm such a jerk about it now that when anybody asks a question, primary care, it doesn't matter, that type of line of questioning, I'm like, stop. And it's unfair because I know they're just doing their job. And, if their boss is going to give them shit if they don't do the same stop. This is silly. Just check whatever you need to check. But I can't not do that. And I can't just be like, no, I'm fine. There's a little bit of a fuck you in me. Like, come on, man,
Yeah, I'm well known on the medical campus because I sat on some boards and helped design their charting system. And I tell them I'm not going to answer those honestly. So how would you like me to answer them? And they know me by now. They just kind of laugh and they we go through it and I don't answer them honestly. But I'm upfront about the fact that I'm going to lie. So so that's one of the myths is that we don't tell that you can't tell.
You can't tell if somebody's suicidal.
Not always, no. It doesn't, and then we also don't cry wolf. I mean, never assume we're crying wolf. I mean, people might say all the time, I'm going to commit suicide tomorrow, and they don't. And they repeat that tomorrow for 2 weeks of tomorrows. But maybe on that second week and second day, that tomorrow comes true. So even though that person repeats their declaration over and over and over again, know that something is going on. Either there's depression or a need for attention, or they haven't developed the guts, quote unquote, to do it, but they're going to do it sometime. So don't take it for granted that they're just playing with you. I've heard often people say that, oh, if they're saying it a lot, they don't mean it. That's not true. Sometimes they just don't mean it then. Sometimes the taste of that word in their mouth just doesn't feel right that day. And they'll do it 14 days from now after trying that taste out over and over and over again.
What about, so those two myths, the first one that you can't always tell, right? And the second one about, I think you're essentially saying, believe what someone's saying. Yeah. What was that like for you in your, and we're going way back because you first tried when you were 9, right? Which is interesting. I had a conversation with someone yesterday and they were 8. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like 8, 9 years old. It's like, wow. And you had that teenagers, and then you in 2013 had what you're calling as a suicide attempt, right? With your hands. So you've been in this game for years. Yeah. Would we be able to tell if you were suicidal? Would we need to ask? What do we need to do if you're, not you per se, but I want you to use you as the example of like, are you letting people know, or is it something that we need
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I am. I will never tell her, and it's very unlikely that she'll find this until she's older, but my goddaughter keeps me going. For a long time, she was the only person that I loved. I didn't know that I could love. I thought I was broken. But I knew that I loved her. And the thought of breaking her heart broke mine. So I stayed alive for her. It didn't matter how bad I was hurting. I stayed alive for her because the thought of her hurting is bad because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I found a very good therapist finally for the first time ever. And I've just started learning my lessons a couple years ago. I hope that it doesn't take people this long to do it. I hope they start sooner. But she has really good enunciation and she says bullshit really well.
Nice.
I just kept trying them on like pairs of shoes and they just didn't fit well. I mean, they looked good and they said the right things, but we ended up becoming friends and chatting more often than not. And she's friendly. And I would even call her a good neighbor if I lived in the same town that she did.
Yeah.
But she calls bullshit all the time, and she's right. She knows when to. And she's got a way of poking thorns in my side to the point where pus leaks out that I didn't even know was there. Because in order to heal from crap, you have to let the wounds bleed, and get all that infection out. And that's a metaphor,
Right.
but it's also the truth.
Yeah. Or you could go even further with it. That's how you have a healthy scar, right? But if not,
Hmm.
it's a problem. I am really curious about that. So it took you a while to find a therapist that you had that kind of connection with. So, yeah, what's the difference? Because I'm sure a lot of people are, and including me, not that therapist. He's okay, but nah. Fuck it. I don't want to do this anymore. Right? Like,
Yeah,
why am I doing this? How many times am I going to start over again? But you found
yeah,
one.
I did.
It's awesome.
I think a lot of my time has been spelt, has been spent
Yeah.
just being too busy helping people instead of myself. Because folks get told a lot, if you feel really bad, help somebody that's worse off than you. Um,
Yeah.
I don't judge worse off, because I learned a long time ago, if when somebody says, "Oh, I didn't have it as bad as you," screw that, because then you're telling somebody who doesn't maybe get hit as hard as you that they have no right to their journey, that they have no right to feel bad.
Yeah.
So you never judge somebody else's pain. So there is no worse off. But I spent a lot of time helping folks and making my mind busy with that. So I never considered my own problems until my world blew up about 2 years ago. And then I didn't have anything to consider because I didn't have anything. Um,
Mm.
so that's when I found that therapist, and it just all meshed. But things have to be in the right place at the right time to do that.
Yeah. How's the lockdown been for you?
On one hand, it hasn't really changed that much, because I really don't, like I said, my world blew up 2 years ago. So I lost a good number of my physical friends. I have online friends and stuff, but so it hasn't changed much, but it also hasn't changed much because I was given a case of necrotizing fasciitis for my birthday in February. And
What is that?
the flesh eating disease.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the back of my neck, and it was 16 centimeters by
Mm.
11 centimeters. Yeah, and I was if it wasn't for COVID, I would have been traveling around with my surgeon to prove that people can survive from that. They don't see it on
Wow.
cadavers. So I'm in and out of the hospital at least once a week for wound care and that sort of thing still. And I have a nurse that comes to the house and all that. So
Mm.
um, when I'm well, my social life will go away. Um,
Yeah.
so I still see people and stuff. So it really hasn't changed that much. It's just I get cotton swabs down my face often to make sure that I'm still well.
Mm.
I yearn to be at home just by myself for a few days on some weeks.
Yeah. There is have you written a book?
A couple, yeah.
Is there a theme on resiliency in there somewhere?
Well, I don't know. It depends on if you consider it nonfiction or fiction.
You tell
Some
me,
people,
because it's like, this is not your typical story, see.
I know. I mean, somebody said that I wasn't telling the truth, that my whole life was lies. Um, I I don't dispel reincarnation, and I think this is just my last time on Earth, so I'm shoving it all in, because I don't
Right.
have any more trips. Um, but like I said, I'm really not afraid of anything. I mean, a lot happened to me when I was very young, and I gobble up experiences like some people gobble up gumballs. I was outed on the evening news when I was 18. My house was set on fire when I was 20. I've done everything I possibly could because I've just been thirsty for experience. And because of those experiences, people ask me to do this. And I mean, when somebody needs something, they ask the busiest person, because you can rely on those people. And that, and the fact that I'm a bit of a smart ass and I can do things well because I only do the things well that I can do.
Yeah.
I've just had opportunity, but I've never traveled overseas, and
Mhm.
I've never owned a poodle. And, I mean, there's lots of things I haven't done.
Sure. You can't actually do everything.
No, no.
Like, that'd be a really long list. Like, it's not
Yeah,
actually possible, but you sounds like not just the stuff you've done, but the stuff you've just dealt with, I guess.
I'm not afraid to, though. I mean,
Yeah.
how many people are afraid to go up and talk to homeless people?
Right.
I'm not. Um, my goddaughter had a lot of complications when she was young, and she's got health issues. And so I've encouraged her to do every possible thing she can to build core strength and to be brave, because she's going to be very small when she's an adult.
Oh, yeah.
And because of my contact, she's been in a movie when she was less than a year old. She's ridden a pony before she was 4. And I mean, by herself, like a real pony, not a Shetland. She's done all these things. And so, I mean, her life sounds fictional because she's done all this stuff, but it's to make her, as confident and as strong and as believing in herself as possible, So it's just who who can bless you, and if you're willing to take that chance. So it's just, how brave you are.
Have you been able to see her in the lockdown?
Yeah. She lives in Lincoln. I live in Omaha, and I'm moving to Seward, which is a town of about, I think it's about 8,000 people, but it's 20 minutes from her front door to my front door.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I moved here because of medical stuff. They didn't know what I had in Lincoln. Specialists didn't have a clue. So I moved here 3 years ago. We figured it out, and now I can do care in anywhere because I know it's wrong. So yeah, I'm moving back there so I can be close to her.
Yeah. Now, just so people know where you are in the world, Omaha, if I'm not mistaken, is the home of the baseball World Series, College Baseball World Series. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, College World Series. Not this year, but usually.
Right. Lincoln is the home of the University of Nebraska.
The academic portion, yeah. Omaha is UNMC, the University of Nebraska Medical Center, the Mayo Clinic of the Midwest. We're the ones that take care of the Ebola patients and have one of the crisis centers for COVID when COVID first started. The people on the cruise ships came here. Yeah, we have a really, I was going to say a really sick medical care, but that's the wrong word. SIC, not SICK. We have a really good medical facility. Warren Buffett's Cancer Center is here, and just a lot of experimentation and stuff. People that get big wounds in the back of their heads, they make medical journals, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool place to be. Omaha and Lincoln both. Totally different feels. Omaha is kind of corporate business and really rushed, and they have big skyscrapers, and Lincoln has a law that nothing can be taller than the state capitol, which is only 13 stories tall, and they have a more crunchy granola. It's easy to be poor there because everybody sings Kumbaya sort of feel.
Right.
Yeah, so it's very different towns, but very close together.
Any other myths? I like the myth combo.
The myths?
Misunderstandings.
Being mentally ill does not make you suicidal. I'm a transgender individual, and there's the statistic that in the queer community, trans folks are 4 times as likely to try and commit suicide than other queer members on the acronym, which is incredibly long.
Right.
And folks think, well, that's because you're mentally ill. No, that's because of so many different obstacles and lack of support and things like that. You don't need to be mentally ill to try and commit suicide.
Right.
You can be incredibly mentally ill and never think of it.
Sure.
It can be because of pressures. You can have committed a crime and not know how to be in jail. You can have, no solvency monetarily. You can have lost a child, had a divorce. You can, a small pet have been, died or whatever. You can have being bullied in school. Any sort of pressure that you're just not able to handle or don't know how to handle can make you want not to live anymore. I know 2 schizophrenic people. They're living with schizophrenia. Killing themselves would never occur to them. One of them is very offended by the idea. So mental illness and suicide can go hand in hand, but they don't have to. And in fact, I think that suicide can sometimes be an okay option, but you have to be very sane in order to choose that option.
Do you think it should be? I don't know the law. I know back in the day it was illegal. Now I don't know if it's a gray area. Do you think that it should be something that people should have the right to do?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Not just because you have a disease that's causing you a lot of pain, physical pain, for example, because you simply don't want to be here. You get to decide why. Like you don't have to justify it to the world. It's your choice. You think that's
if you're not mentally ill, yeah. But with a qualification. If you have people are going to want to skewer me for this. If you have a very long history of mental illness, if you have, like you said, dysthymia or something that it gives you so much mental pain and you've lived with that for a very, very, very long time, or if your quality of life is bad and you just don't, whatever. I mean, but there shouldn't be any judgment. I don't have any idea what your life is like. But if you can prove that you're of mental competency and that decision is being made, or if there is an advocate for you that is not a zealot in something, that they don't want to kick you off for insurance, they don't have a vested interest in keeping you alive or making you dead, then absolutely. Because we own our bodies and we own our lives. And it's an unpopular thing to say. It's a scary thing to say because everything is about life. But even pro-life individuals really seem to be more about pro-birth than pro-life. I mean, once we get born, people really care a lot less than before we're born, and we own ourselves. But it's suicide is in a time of crisis when we're making a rash decision because we hurt and things seem hopeless. But if they don't seem hopeless, if it's just a thing that's chronic that we just absolutely can't live with anymore, or is causing us so much long-term chronic pain, then I think that's a different situation altogether. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it should be legal with guidelines.
Yeah.
With guidelines, because if we have a child that only feels pain, we can terminate that child. If we have a spouse that only has certain brain activities and they only, can do that, we can terminate that life.
Yeah.
So why can't we terminate our own? That's the life that we have the most knowledge about. We don't know for sure that the person on life support can't feel, can't think, but we know we can.
Yeah. There's something about suicide. We treat it differently than I think anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. And because terminating our own lives seems really close to terminating in a time of crisis, it seems like it's the same thing, but it shouldn't be.
I think it's more than scary. It feels like a lot of people look at it with repugnance.
Yeah, it can.
It's not just scary. It's like revulsion.
Okay, frightened to the nth degree of going to hell.
Okay. Yeah.
No one wants to go to hell. And when my dad was a child, he tells about getting in trouble for mowing the lawns around the graves of the people that killed themselves in the Catholic cemetery because the graves weren't to be attended to.
Oh, wow.
And he got in trouble for clearing them of weeds because they went to hell.
I never heard of that before. That's a very
old school Catholic. Yeah. I'm a retrained left-hander. So yeah, old school Catholic.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, you couldn't, they went straight to hell. So people they're revolted for a number of reasons. Many, many different cultures think that folks that did that they don't even exist anymore. They don't want to follow. And their families, they can't join them in heaven. It's a scary, nasty thing.
It's just astounding to me that with all our some advances in medication, I suppose some advances in other areas of health or mental health, the suicide rate is going up, which is a little bit strange for me. That would be something that you would think, I don't know, would be evening out or going down a little bit. But the data I find, I nose around, right? I want to make myself I understand this stuff as much as I can. Yeah. It's not going down. I know you may not be an expert at suicide because you have tried, but I do like to ask people that kind of one of the points of the show is that you've tried. In my mind, it does kind of make you an expert, at least in your lived experience. Mm-hmm. What is going on?
If you can afford the medications, you can take them.
Yeah, right.
The population is bigger than it was, right. So more people are existing in order to do it. Folks have to work longer, which make their bodies, hurt more. Folks are working until their mid-70s now, whereas before, my grandparents retired when they were in their mid-60s. People are living in more crowded conditions. The world is much more scary because of social media and news coverage. You hardly ever hear anything good on the news anymore. Right. So depression, no matter what you hear, my goddaughter, one of the reasons I want to be so close to her is because all she hears is COVID, and she doesn't understand the correct information. She thinks if you wear a mask, you're going to be safe, not the opposite way around. And she's terrified. She pulls out parts of her eyelids, eyelashes, and her hair, and she's 8 years old. And this sort of depression is reaching tons of people.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that sort of thing. I mean, back in the 80s, okay, Reagan was a little weird and we had some political stuff, but
Really weird.
yeah, well, yeah. But it wasn't as bad. It's become bad exponentially because of technology, and the same technology that's giving us better health is also making us more depressed and more scared and bringing the world closer together. And all those problems they're huge. We feel hopeless now and joyful, but we feel hopeless also.
And add to that, what you had said earlier about the way we engage with people who are not doing well, pain, despair, distress. I can't imagine that helps very much either.
No.
In that we don't do it, don't know how to do it, whatever. It's a lot of stuff.
It is. I'm learning a lot about my friends with the Black Lives Matter thing and the COVID thing. I mean, it's teaching me a lot about people that I had thought different things about before. A lot of folks think that they know and they don't, and vice versa. Would be well served to meet more folks and listen a lot, instead of speak a lot.
Amen. You think you're going to try again?
Right now, I would say no. If I get to a quality of life where my quality of life is very bad, I would hope that I have a living will in place, and I have all that stuff in place, and I'm pretty well fortified for not living a life that I don't want to. But right now, with my acronymed mental health pretty well maintained, I don't think I will, because I know what my issues are, and I told somebody just the other day, underneath all of my emotions and hard times, sometimes underneath all that, I relax and I rest in the fact that it's mental illness causing these feelings. It's not reality. So when I'm freaking out or feel really depressed, I can take a breath and take a fraction of a second to know that this is not reality. This is just me manifesting the stuff that happens. And then, in an hour or two or whatever, or next day or next week, it's going to be okay. And then my dog will jump up and lick my face.
Did you ever get a diagnosis that you felt was accurate?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, first there's PTSD. I was assaulted in 2014, and I was filling out a PTSD sheet after the assault, and I asked the counselor, "What do you do if all of these things are already true?" So that was one of them, and then there was clinical depression and well-integrated DID.
What's that?
DID is what they used to call multiple personality disorder. It's very common in kids that are severely abused or spouses that are severely abused. Mm-hmm. It's a way for you to go somewhere else when you're being hurt, so that you don't have to experience it. Luckily, mine was well integrated. So the personalities I took on or whatever, they weren't separate individuals. They were just different kind of moods, different kinds of phasing out. I lose time sometimes, and I used to lose time then. But folks, they thought that I was just a colorful personality that would switch, high-strung maybe. But now I understand what it is, and I tell people that I'm close to about it. And I guess the public at large now, but I tell people that I'm close to about it, and I've written about it. It's in some poetry that I've written and stuff. It's odd because I can write a poem about anything and perform it, whatever, but telling somebody close to me is more difficult for some reason.
And does medication help?
Yeah.
It does. I know some people struggle to ever find medication that works or helps, and others seem to, find something, right? Or things.
Yeah, it's a struggle. There's something called pharmacoeugenics. If somebody says that word to their doctor, they'll know what it is. But pharmaco-something-genics it's a study where chemicals will be tested on you to determine if those chemicals actually work on you or not.
Wow.
I wish I could say it correctly, but it's rather new, and it will save you a lot of time in finding the right medication.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, that's an example of what I'm talking about. We're getting better at stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you'd think that might have a direct.
Yeah.
Well, you got to afford it. You have to have insurance. There's other obstacles. Maybe in 20 years it'll look different. Yeah.
Medicaid and Medicare do cover it.
Yeah. Good.
But it's a GI thing. But yeah, it's pharmacogenics or something. But genics is at the end and pharmaco's in the beginning.
Okay.
So fill in the middle and they'll be
Right.
able to help.
Google should be able to help you with that if you want to check it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I would think.
I have two more questions and then I'll shut up and let you share anything else, because I always say I don't assume I ask the best questions, the right questions. The reality is I could talk about this stuff for a while,
Yeah.
If there's a kid out there who is experiencing the world in any way similar to the way you were, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's very little you can actually do, really. I mean, you're not going to fly over there. Like, you're in your room in Nebraska. But
Yeah.
do you think if they hear this, like, what do you think you might be able to say to them, should they hear this? Are there any words that might bring them some comfort or give them something they might need?
I have a practical piece of advice and an emotional piece of advice. The emotional piece of advice is just because people tell you that you're supposed to love whomever is talking to you doesn't mean they're going to treat you nicely. It took me a long time to understand that my father was screwed up by his father.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he was screwed up by his father, it didn't make it right.
Mm-hmm.
He was a grown up and he had choices to make and he made the wrong ones because he chose to.
Mm-hmm.
He might have loved me. I don't know. We haven't talked in over 20 years. But he chose to make the wrong choice in how he treated me. And just because he was my dad doesn't mean that I needed to love him back. I could if I chose to, but I also could not love him and I could leave. I could find a teacher, a fireman, anybody, and that's okay. If you're being hurt, if your body's being hurt or your mind's being hurt, or if they're having sex with you or whatever, if you're feeling bad because of the person that's supposed to love you for telling you bad things about yourself, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you can leave. And social services is so gosh darn busy right now that if you're not bruised, if you have food in your house, if you have good clothes, they're probably not going to help you.
Right.
So if they don't help you, go to a youth shelter. Even if there's not one in your town, go to one where there is. But get away. I mean, and that's not recommended advice.
Right.
But if it's that or your life, get away. I mean, just go away, because not every parent, not every caretaker loves a child like they should. Not every teacher loves a child like they should. And it's because they were screwed up, but they're still adults and they still should choose the right thing. They just don't. So don't trust social services all the time. Don't trust your parents all the time. Don't be an asshole and use that as an excuse because you got grounded because you used your phone after 10 o'clock at night. But if you're really hurting and you really think, that you're not going to live because they don't care for you, if that's the truth, then get out.
Mm-hmm.
Save your life and figure out the details later. That would be my emotional advice. My tangible advice is to have a go bag ready all the time, because
what do you mean a go bag?
Go bag is
to take off.
Yeah, if you have to run away, or if something happens, if you get in a fight with someone at home, because of the advice that I just said, you need to have a bag packed and ready to leave and not held in the house. It needs to be in a plastic bag buried under a rock or something, or at a friend's house or something like that, with a little bit of money and proof of who you are, some extra shoes, extra clothes, a few snacks, that sort of thing, so that if you do have to leave, you can make it for a day or two. And always have that ready if you think there's going to be an emergency. Because oftentimes if you have a fight with your folks or something, they're going to shove you out the door and close the door. And then what are you going to do? And if your go bag is in the house, you're screwed. And that's not just for kids with suicide thoughts of suicide. That's for kids that are queer or trans or whatever, and they want to come out and they maybe get thrown out. But keep your mind and body safe, no matter who's putting it at threat, and then make sure that you can keep your mind and body safe for a day or two. So that's my bit of advice to kids. But just because you're in a traditional relationship with an adult doesn't mean that they're going to love you traditionally.
Right. And the other part of the question would be to the people in their lives, the good ones, not the abusers.
Yeah.
No, really. I mean, the ones that want to help, want to support. They're dealing with a child or a sister or maybe a coworker who's really not doing well. from
Hmm.
somebody who you've been on both sides for a while, sounds like. Do you anything for them that might be helpful or useful for them to understand or embrace?
Ask them if they have a plan.
Mm,
Ask them if they have a plan. Ask them if they're going to kill themselves and if they have a plan. Don't be afraid of the word suicide. Don't be afraid to ask them if they thought about how they're going to do it. Invite them over. Even if they say it every single day, twice a day, let them know that you're hearing them and you're going to sit with them, or you're going to have somebody else sit with them, or do they need a ride to the hospital?
mm-hmm.
If they threaten to hurt themselves or somebody else, they'll be held for 72 hours. Maybe that's enough time to get them to feel better. It's difficult to commit someone without more than one individual being involved, but a 72-hour hold sometimes makes a world of difference. But just not to be afraid to talk about it directly, and not to be afraid to keep it a secret. I mean, tell someone, tell a relative, tell their spouse, whatever. But most importantly, just talk about it and ask if they have a plan. Get them to talk about how they might do it, because if they're going to shoot themselves, look for a gun. I mean,
Right.
look for ammunition. If they're going to cut themselves, get rid of the knives, lock them up. I mean, child-proof the house as if they were a toddler. I mean, that's, and then keep an eye on them for a while, but find out and then see if you can help.
Yeah. Mm. What else? That's a big question, right? What else you got? No, I always I have questions, but I'm like, I don't, I'm learning this as I go. I'm like, I could have asked that. So I just sort of throw it back on you.
That's all right. I think that if we started in the beginning in the first place, we wouldn't have the ending problems. I mean, if we talked to our neighbors or at least waved, if we felt more of a connection, we wouldn't feel so alone. I mean, that's such a simple answer, but it's such a simple answer.
Right.
I mean, I asked my housemate if he knew his neighbors. Now he hadn't talked to him.
Yeah.
I've only lived here for a year and a half, and I know more about my neighbor than he has living here for almost 20. Um, and I realize I talk a lot, but it's difficult for me too. He does this Myers-Briggs stuff all the time to a point where it's kind of nauseating. But to make him happy, I did the test too, and I'm an INFP, I guess, which is like super rare and super closed up and introverted and stuff. But I'll go. I mean, nobody's a stranger in my life.
Yeah.
And I wish more people could do that, because if you could not make friends, but just look somebody in the eye, and it's, or at somebody's shoulder, because a lot of people can't do eye contact. I have a young friend living with autism, and I said, okay, let's both look at that dashboard. Now talk to me. Because if we have this point of connection, even if it's not at each other, then, we can bond some way. And a lot of times people are suicidal because they feel so alone. They just need some sort of connection.
I never want to generalize, but that what you just said really resonates. I mean, have to think that's the main thing, really, when you boil it down, is that feeling of being alone.
Yeah, I mean, there's precipitators for it. I mean, maybe I'm committing suicide because I'm broke, but if I had somebody that just to be with and hold my hand through it, or or talk about it, whatever the issue.
Sure. And if you're rich, you might be able to insulate yourself in a way that someone who's poor can't. You're going to go get a massage more often, and you can go, there's ways. It doesn't mean you're not miserable and you won't try to end your life, but sometimes it gives you a cushion that you don't have when you're impoverished.
Right.
Yeah. I think those are some wonderful points. And I think that there are people who will hear it and be better for it from what you shared. So I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity.
I always ask people, like, I'm always a little bit curious about their day-to-day life. Like, what's one thing today or tomorrow that you do that's super joyful?
I am working on this line of art called I'm Not Your Medusa. I make art and I donate it to charities. And I realize that because they're charities, I get inflated prices for them. Not that I get the money the charities do, but
right. No, that's cool.
Yeah. But I averaged, I don't know, $300 or $400 a drawing. And so the first one was this Medusa that she wasn't supposed to be, but somebody called her one. And I said, no, she's not your Medusa. And that just led to a string of things. I have one for Trump, and every weird little lock of hair had something that he said that was vile in it.
How many locks of hair are there?
I'll send you a copy of it. It's a lot of hair.
There needs to be a lot of effing hair.
It was a lot of hair. I didn't even know he said some of the stuff he said. And it was, yeah. And that was a private commission, but so I do that, and I'm working on one of those right now. And I'm also moving, and it's been the first place that I've lived in by myself for 2.5 years because my world blew up. And
your world blew up.
So, yeah. A guy that called my brother for 10 years or so. I ministered in the same church that he did under him, and found out, long story short, that he was not even ordained, but he embezzled from the church and did a whole bunch of nasty things and left couples at the altar and stuff like that. And
that was the main thing that you're referring to when your world blew up?
Yeah.
Wow.
And people around me and I brought him to task and exposed him for what he was.
Was he just a flat out liar?
We're pretty certain that if he were diagnosed, he would have narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah, something.
It's a mental illness. So, I mean, in my heart, I love him. But the things that his illness caused him to do hurt a lot of people. Yeah. And he's incredibly magnanimous, and he moved out of state, and where he is now, he's got the same following.
You've heard that story in some way other times. Yep.
Yeah. With the last mess that he made, just got exposed and resolved 4 months ago, and I cleaned it up.
Oh, you did? Wow.
Yeah, because at the church we were considered to be, business partners and stuff. So people kept saying it's not your responsibility, but some of them, if I had acted like they told me to, I would have been legally responsible. So each mess that I find out about or they contact me about, I have to look at. So it caused me to be homeless, and I was accused of some things that were his way of retaliation and things like that. And it's just been hard. I feel very battered by this community right now. So I'm packing to move anyway. I've been staying with a friend. I floated around for a while because I didn't have any resources, but I've been staying with my friend for a year and a half. So now I'm going to move into my own place in 2.5 weeks. So I've been packing all of my stuff and drawing Medusas.
Right, and drawing. If God or the universe or whatever anyone happens to believe in, your life was not meant to be easy.
No.
Just because I said this to one other guest once, but you're the only other one where I think to myself, if it was supposed to be easy, someone made a huge mistake. Because it's just, you have had your challenges, and I say this without being truly like trite about it, or I don't even know what the hell the right word is. Like, it's astounding. It's like, wow, man, you are here.
Yeah, but I've been really blessed. I mean, my seizure disorder has led me to meet some really incredible people. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't give it up in a heartbeat. I've been so blessed. And as a performance poet, I've written some things people told me not to perform. And then at the end of those performances, people have come to me and said, I thought I was crazy until I heard you.
Yeah, and usually when people say don't to perform it, those are probably the ones you need to perform.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. And live through this. I've gotten emails from time to time and said, you saved my life. And I feel so freaking humbled by that. Wouldn't have given that up. It was hard, and I wouldn't want to relive it on purpose, but I wouldn't give it up.
Well, thanks again, Cei.
You're welcome.
And you have a great name.
And keep in touch. You're a cool human too. I like you.
Oh, thanks, Cei. I feel the same way about you. And I'll look forward to that link, and I'll talk to you soon. And until then, I hope your day and days are great.
Yeah, good. You too. Stay well.
All right, Cei. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. As always, thanks so much for listening. And special thanks to Cei in Nebraska. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Suicide Noted. We also have a YouTube channel, so if video's your thing, you can check that out. Again, if you're a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to share your story, you can email us at hello@suicidenoted.com. Until we connect again, stay strong. Do the very best you can. I'll talk to you soon.